Okay, I'll call the October 27th Committee of the Whole meeting to order and I'm looking for an adoption of the agenda. Councillor Byers. All those in favor?
Just a note.
Is there an addition I forgot?
Yeah, as amended, we did send it out, but it wasn't until this morning, in addition of a second closed session to discuss intergovernmental relations.
Okay, thank you. With the addition?
Yes.
Okay, all those in favor? Carried. Okay, I'm looking for the adoption of the minutes from the October 13th. Anyone see any errors or anything? Councillor Wilkinson. Okay, all those in favor? Carried. And we have a delegation. John, I believe, is going to Skype in, and Al, you're speaking to it as well. Is that correct?
Hopefully not too much.
Okay, so we'll wait on John.
Might as well jump up here just in case.
Welcome, John. Can you hear us?
I sure can.
Okay, and when you are ready. Okay, John, anytime you want to start, if you can hear us.
Sure. Do you have my presentation on your screen?
No, we just have people with bad hair.
Are you talking about yourself again?
I am on color.
All right, Steve, it keeps saying share screen. Possible. Okay, how was that?
There we go. Yes, we can see it.
All right, thanks. I get some really cool feedback hearing myself 3 seconds later, so it's going to be a bit interesting. Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. It's a good opportunity for us to touch base and get a bit of an update on the Vision Park Master Plan process. Can everybody hear me okay at your end before I ramble on for 20 minutes?
Yes. Yes.
Sounds great. Thank you. So my name is John Butchko. I'm with EDS Group. We have other partner consultants in this process as well. RC Strategies and PERC is helping us with engagement. Shelby Engineering with our geotechnical engineering. PALS Survey providing some geomatics and site surveying. We've also engaged V3 Engineering from a civil engineering side. So a fairly robust team for what we think is a very important project for your community. Tonight I'm going to talk about four components. First is the project scope. Give you a brief summary of the stakeholder engagement that we've done through this process. The meat of the project itself being the draft phasing strategy. And then lastly, talk about some next steps. And at that point, maybe Al can take over and validate some of those next steps. So first off with project scope, we started off with a needs assessment, the first component, and that's looking at trends. What are the demands in recreation based on our experience in communities like yours across Western Canada? What are some of the trends? We then completed some stakeholder engagement. Thirdly, some site investigations that included a very detailed site survey. So we have a very accurate survey of ground conditions and elevations of the site. Site servicing, 3B, we looked at the servicing the potential to ensure we have adequate services for sanitary power, water, whatnot. Geotechnical testing, we did some actual boreholes for the purpose of understanding the soil conditions for structures, but more importantly for soil permeability and for drainage. And then the last one is field assessments, looking at the fields themselves and the playability of each of the ball diamonds. The fourth component was site program identification, and really what that means is what is the program, what are the elements that we think are important and essential to make Vision Park successful. And then the last component is a recommended phasing strategy that'll be compiled in a final report. Some of the site challenges that we had found through the scoping process, first off is site drainage. There's some concerns with the ditching. There's erosion in many areas. Secondly, some fields are poorly drained in some locations. Thirdly, erosion and sedimentation is a concern on the site. Another challenge is diamond access. There are some diamonds that are quite a distance away from parking, which present a bit of a challenge. The fifth one is some physical disturbance from Trans Mountain from the pipeline installation that was recently completed. Sixth, large expanses of mowed grass. I say that's a challenge because it presents an awful big obligation from a maintenance perspective and weed control and whatnot to deal with such a large site. Number seven, an excess of diamonds for most uses. You have, as you acclaim, one of the world's largest facilities with 24 diamonds. That works great for one large tournament a year, but for day-to-day use, it is excessive. Number eight, orientation of some of the fields is not being or isn't necessarily ideal. So the direction that they face. So one of the key challenges that I really want to focus on is site drainage and looking at some of the challenges that we have related to that. The first point is we have poorly defined ditches. There are some ditches in some areas, but in many cases they're very sharp bottomed or they're in poor orientation. They need proper profile to spread the water flow. And what's happening is it's causing an accelerated erosion because the site is fairly steep. Secondly, surface erosion. So you can see in the photo on the screen in the background, some areas where there isn't vegetative cover off the roadway. Presumably this is where vehicles have parked in the past, but bare soils leads to erosion. Thirdly, poorly drained areas. And the plan is over time to regrade some of the outfield areas to help deal with some of those poorly drained areas. Next one we have here, more challenges as mismanaged drainage routes. So the site does require a stormwater strategy, and I'll show you an image further down what I mean by that. Soil composition, when we are going to develop the new fields, it's important that we bring in the right material. Soils that have the proper permeability, meaning they soak up enough water to grow grass very well, but they also drain because we do have a fairly wet site. The third point, having designated drainage areas, we want to create some naturalized areas to direct surface water into, rather than creating open storm ponds, having some naturalized areas where some of the excess water can go. The last point is site reorganization. We're looking at abandoning some of the ball diamonds in some of the areas and converting them to alternate uses. The next I'm going to talk about is a summary of stakeholder engagement. So we had 2 stakeholder meetings with both the Edson Minor Ball Association and the Mixed Slow Pitch organization. Secondly, we've had several meetings with administration, as well as internal meetings amongst our design team. Thirdly, a user group member survey done online with the Minor Ball Association and Mixed Slow Pitch. And in that we had 409 responses. So very good response rate for only meeting with those 2 groups. This is a series of statistics coming out of that survey. Looking at the top left, looking at the participation, 48, nearly half the people use the site during the summer 3 to 4 times a week. So a lot of usership. The type of involvement on the top right in that chart, you can see majority of them were players. The reason why the numbers here exceed 100% is because some people were both a player as well as a coach and a manager. So it really shows we've got a lot of that people playing that actually know the fields intimately. The main question on this slide is overall, how well does the park site meet the needs? And the response was somewhat well. One of the demands that we had found is that the Minor Ball Association is looking for a home here. They're looking for proper diamonds that suit the needs of minor ball. And it's a slight different configuration that I'll discuss later on. And some of the concern when they say it's the not well, really comes from that group, because the site, of course, those ball diamonds aren't made for hardball. On this slide, this shows a number of statistics. I'm not going to go through them in detail, just looking at some of the overall highlights. Somewhat satisfied seems to be one of the more prominent responses here. I'll look at going down the list here. 6 down the overall number of diamonds, 63% of people are very satisfied, mostly because there are just so many of them, and that offers so many different orientations. But at this point, we've come to the conclusion that there actually are more diamonds that are needed at this point. So again, I won't go into this in detail, but I'll field any questions afterward if you do have any specific ones. Again, another big chart that I'm not going to go through in detail, some of the main highlights, and this is where we start to tease out other things that we're looking for. Looking at, for example, the very first one, improving site amenities such as concessions and washrooms. You see, it's very important, or somewhat important, is 94%. So these are going to help guide us as we finalize the master plan to make recommendations for some of the supporting amenities. May they be small playgrounds, camp spaces with amenities, or if it's just washrooms spread throughout the site. I'll now talk about the draft phasing strategy. In doing this, to determine the phasing strategy, we had a couple of very detailed site assessments, and I'll show you just a few slides of some of our observations. Here you can see one of the diamonds. This is one of the more, I would say, currently used. So you can see there's bags out there. There's some people rounding the bases, so it was recently used. You can see in the background the disturbance of soil here behind that blue fence, which is at the north end of the site, the Trans Mountain pipeline installation, which we kind of caught the tail end of it when we did this most latest assessment. I spoke earlier and said I'd talk about how you have some drainage routes that are mismanaged. So you have a ditch going alongside this roadway, and the ditch actually goes and it dumps all the water right into the dugout itself. So part of the strategy is to say, yes, we need ditches, but also when we take that water, it needs to go to the appropriate place. So you aren't flooding out and creating erosion around a very key, important part of one of the diamonds. Surface erosion, so a lot of the areas are barren that don't have vegetation just because of a lack of topsoil over time. Those obviously you have problems with erosion and sedimentation. They're unsightly, they're a trip hazard for spectators or for people getting to the site. So there are good reasons for us to try to eliminate those as best as possible. Our process didn't look at the structure of, I'll call this the entertainment barn or the group gathering site. It is in great structural condition. It's not the prettiest building, but it definitely serves its purpose for its intended use. But again, the structural integrity of this building wasn't part of it, but we do recognize that it does have a very important role to play in the overall use of the site. There are a couple portable washrooms on the site, and these, not portable, self-contained washrooms that are permanent, that are pump out, and these serve a very good function. They're very well placed, certainly not looking at relocating or eliminating these by any means. This is one diamond I'll speak of a bit further on as well. You can see that is in entire disrepair. There's an actual wetland in the back corner. The infield is not being maintained, has a lot of drainage problems. So this is just an example of something that's kind of off in the back 40 that isn't necessarily used and not used for good reason, particularly because of the drainage concerns that we do have. So how that helped influence the phasing strategy, we'll see some of the sites that are being abandoned are usually those that are, in this case, derelict or very expensive for us to retrofit. In some areas, this is at the very far east side of the site, around diamonds 1, 2, 3, 4. You can see how close the pipeline construction had come, where it had actually taken out 2 entire diamonds and part of diamond number 2 as well in the outfield. But even in the space in between these diamonds, there are some challenges with low spots. You can see just by nature of the long grass and the challenges there are to maintain that. So it's not just looking at the fields themselves, but also the spaces in between that is included in our exercise. So we did a field assessment of all 24 diamonds. So here's just a couple of examples. The first one on field 1, we looked at everything from the condition of the backstop, the infield, outfield, the drainage pattern. So is it, the ideal scenario is that it drains in one direction from center field to home plate. or if it does go left to right, it's a very subtle slope, or it's very balanced. So each of these were given a weighting. So for example, the condition of the backstop is only worth 3, but the infield is worth 8. It's much more important than the condition of the backstop, because a backstop we can fix for a few $1,000s, whereas the infield can cost tens of thousands of dollars to retrofit. So in this case, field 1 was given a score out of 30. It scored 24 points. In comparison, field number 22 that I spoke to earlier, that shows the wetland in the back corner, this one only scored a 10. It has structural integrity challenges with some of the fence because of the drainage. It has obvious surface drainage problems. Also very hard to get to. This is one that you have to walk down the steep slope to get down to the field itself. So it's definitely not ideal. So this is one, as an example, that kind of fell off when we decided to eliminate some fields. This is certainly one of them that was eliminated. I'm going to show you 3 images and just give you the highlights of this. The first one is phase 1 of the concept plan. And so we've proposed this in 3 phases, whether this is done in 10 years, 20 years, 4 years. We still have some work with administration to determine what the capital costs are and how this is going to be performed over a number of years. Ultimately, in the first phase, you can see the predominant development is those in color, which is along the very north interface. And those are a reflection of the damage done by the Trans Mountain pipeline installation. So in this case, of those diamonds, 6 of these diamonds were affected from construction. As I mentioned earlier, there was demand from Minor Ball to have a home for 3 different age groups, first being mosquito, peewee, and then bantam. So this plan in the first phase brings those Minor Ball diamonds to Vision Park for the first time. The difference between those, mosquito has a shorter fence by about 50 feet compared to slow pitch. Peewee is about equivalent, bantam is a bit more. They also have mounds, they have pitcher's mounds. So it's a slightly different infield configuration. If you look at the color of these 3 diamonds on the far, I'm not sure if you can see my cursor, but on the east side, I'm looking at diamonds number 1, 4, and 3. They've got a little brown dot in the middle, which is the mound, and they have a grass infield. Whereas if you look at the other diamonds, they have an entirely shale infield. So they are slightly different. It doesn't mean that those can't be used for slow pitch, or for example, if there's a PB tournament, they can't use slow pitch diamonds. It's just they have different infields. The other aspect shown on phase 1 is what we call planned washroom building. So there is already a proposed building that we were told of. So that's shown on here, a new permanent building being built. One slight road realignment toward the northeast or the northwest corner of the site. And that realignment of the road is to accommodate the new diamond number 16 and 17. Originally, those diamonds didn't have proper backfield or outfield sort of distances. So this, when we're rebuilding them, we're ensuring that everything's being built to proper specifications. If you look at this fancy, we call it the Diurnal Chart, but this is just an assessment of Edson itself, where we look at the sun conditions and where the sun sets in the evening. This helps us with optimal field orientation and just by, I think, a good practice of ball diamond design, you never want the batter staring into the sun. So unfortunately, the other players, the pitcher, the infield, and some of the outfielders have to stare in the sun in the evening, but ultimately you want to avoid having your batter and your back catcher staring into the sun. In the second phase, you can see we've started to grow and develop some diamonds further to the south. I will say, I will mention as well, in part of the first phase, we call this it says number 25, new premium slow pitch. So that would be, if we were to do one diamond very well, maybe it has very large bleachers for a couple hundred people. It may have lights, potentially irrigation. It might be cinder block dugouts instead of plywood, but the intent is to do one very well so that you can have championship games and potentially host large events like Western Canadian Games or nationals. As we are in phase 2, as we're moving further with the rest of the diamonds, these are about retrofitting and rebuilding. So it's replacing some fence that's derelict. Some of the outfield fence is in good condition and we can keep, but if you were to look at diamond number 21 on the far, this would be the far west side, the southwest diamond that we're reconfiguring. You can see in the background where the fence used to be, and we're reconfiguring it to bring it to square it off and to design it in the proper location. We're also being very conscious of where these get placed and what the orientation is compared to the grades. You picked a very challenging site to put 24 diamonds. I would venture to say a significant amount of grading effort went in to develop these diamonds. Because of that, if we are to start moving diamonds too much, we're dealing with massive amounts of grading. So we're trying to be compassionate to that, to minimize our costs as much as possible, so that if we are making a move of a field, it's for very good reasons, and it hopefully comes with very little work to regrade. The final phase, the third phase, the third image that I'm showing you here, then has the full build out. You can see at the far southwest corner of the site. So we have 3 diamonds here that are being abandoned. The idea with that is they are the most, I think, derelict. They have the most challenges with grading, most expensive to rebuild. This is a good area for us to start to lead some stormwater into some naturalized area. It also has the opportunity for us to, first off, provide some day use camping, not overnight, but maybe for special events, big tournaments, this might be a camping area. It also gives you, if you look at the line work here, right now this is residential development being shown a part of an area structure plan. We know those homes are not there at this time. However, this gives and it relaxes that space and gives some setback. So when those residences start to be developed, we're not dealing with putting out diamonds or spending money on baseball diamonds that are inevitably going to disappear. One of the other additions that we have right at the entrance, this is the rebuilt diamond number 9, and this would be a premium bantam. So here we have the 4th hardball diamond. So right when you first drive into the site where you have the large, call it the picnic barn, and the large parking lot area, right by there you've got 2 premium diamonds, potentially a new parking lot, and then the hardball diamonds just off to the side. Some of the nice to haves that we're showing on here are right now shown on the far east side of the site. We've got some batting cages. Maybe we start with 1 and it gets built out to 6 if there's the demand. Themed playground, maybe there's amenities like that. So when mom and dad are playing slow pitch, kids are at the playground, or when kids are playing hardball, mom and dad are at the playground. Just having some other amenities for people that are there with the rest of their family. This is a diamond summary of the 24 existing diamonds, number 25 being a new premium slow pitch diamond. You can see the difference between them, and we talked about the infield being slightly different, having a pitcher's mound, but also the fence distance. So number 1, a mosquito diamond, has a 225-foot center field fence, whereas slow pitch, the standard, is 275 across the board. The bantam fields would have the hardball, which is the oldest age group of ball that you have, would have the furthest fence. So I'll speak now to next steps. Number 1, I know administration is currently having discussions with Trans Mountain. We've provided a detailed cost estimate of what it would cost to rebuild the diamonds that are impacted from the current construction. So some negotiation and discussion on what the compensation is, what the process is, how much the town contributes, how does the site get left after construction. The second one is incorporating comments from council after today's discussion. So you may have comments for us tonight. You may pass those through the CAO back to us or through Al. But at the end of the day, we do want to include these comments before we get to finalize the document. The third one is considering supporting uses. So as I spoke to earlier, things like batting cages, playgrounds, day use camping, large bleachers. We're going to explore the appetite of the town to include those things. Fourthly is to finalize our report, so to include all the information brought forward from our stakeholders and to really chart the process that we've gone through. The last thing is initiating the recommendations. Obviously, there are a number of diamonds that have been disturbed that we want to start to rebuild right away, but looking at what is the strategy to implement the plan. And that's my presentation.
Okay, thank you, John. I'll open up to council. Does anyone have any questions? John? Councillor Wilkinson.
To the chair, a comment. I would really like to say thank you very, very much for this report. I really found it very useful. You asked the appropriate people and got their input, and I really appreciate all that you've done. Thank you.
Okay, anyone else have a question? Councillor Sorensen.
Through the chair to John, thank you very much. A ton of information there. Can you just summarize again how many diamonds of softball and hardball you said in the end?
Yeah, in the end, I'm just going to go back to my slide. We have, we're going from 24 diamonds down to 16 total diamonds. Of those, 12 are slow pitch and 4 are hardball. 13 are slow pitch. 13 plus 4 is 17. So there's 17 in the end. That's the new configuration. So 20, yeah, we're going, I'll simplify that. We're going from 24 current slow pitch diamonds to 13 slow pitch and 4 hardball.
Okay, Mr. Mayor, go ahead.
Thank you very much for this presentation. It was very well done. And I think it really showcases the opportunities we have at Vision Park, but also the challenges and the significant investment that's required to make this facility really a premium facility. And I was really impressed with the amount of engagement from the user groups. My question is, moving forward as a part of this plan, do you have any cost estimates on what this would be to implement? And any recommendations on how much time we should take? And further to that, I guess I'll be looking to administration to see if they have any updates from Trans Mountain. I certainly think that we need to get those disturbed diamonds constructed sooner rather than later.
Thank you. Through the chair to respond to that, we have done a detailed cost estimate, quite detailed, I'd say a Class B estimate for the retrofits required to deal with the diamonds disturbed from Trans Mountain. So that was provided through Al. I'm not prepared to comment on it. Al, if he's comfortable, he can, although that's part of the negotiation with Trans Mountain. So that's a bit out of my hands. We have yet to do a comprehensive estimate for the entire build out, only because we're waiting for your feedback in case there are some drastic showstoppers, some drastic changes that we need to make to the plan first. But within coming days, we'll be in a position to be able to do that. The biggest exercise and the biggest cost we thought coming into this was grading. So because we have one chance to do one grading plan, and we want to ensure it's based on the plan that you as a council and administration are comfortable with, we're going to initiate that process immediately upon getting your comments coming out of this meeting. So hence we wanted to make sure we're doing it once and doing it right. But believe it or not, we've discovered the biggest cost in all this is shale. So when you're rebuilding a diamond, red shale actually comes, the most economical source that we could find here comes from southern Saskatchewan. So you can appreciate the cost of that is horrendous compared to local materials. And we've scoured Western Canada, and other municipalities are in the same challenge we are. So when it comes to cost estimates, yeah, we've really done our homework. We've done a lot of research with different quarries across the Western Canada, and yeah, the best we can come up with is an actual province away.
Val, do you have a comment for this?
No, I think, again, you guys been working, Jim has been working with the costs with Trans Mountain. I'm not sure if you want to comment on that where we're at right now. But it has been presented to Trans Mountain. I think some of the cost is recovery part. Again, I'll let Jim share the information so desires. But again, the report is very clear. The plan For us, it's a great plan to move forward with that product. I think that's the key points. It really sets out that vision for Vision Park and where we want to go with it.
Through the chair to the mayor. We got the estimate of the build out of the diamonds that we lost from EDS. It comes to roughly $356,000 per diamond. With the loss of the playground, which is estimated about $100,000 to replace the playground, and about $25,000 for the trail behind Tiffin area that needs to be replaced. We reached out to Trans Mountain, and they have requested and let them know that we are interested in rebuilding it ourselves and asking for $2,325,000 to offset the cost of the diamonds, the playground, and the pathway repairs. So that has taken place. They're in possession of that request and currently reviewing.
Thank you very much for that update. And without question, the Team X project really important to this community, but there's also costs associated with the infrastructure that has been disturbed. So look forward to further updates on that. If I can have one follow-up.
Yep, go ahead.
Through to Mr. Schramm and CEO Derricott and even any other staff here who are ball users, you feel comfortable with this plan? And do you think this is a good way forward based on your experiences out at Vision Park? I know you're immensely what's the word I'm looking for? You know Vision Park very well, Al, so I really look forward to your thoughts on this.
Absolutely. I know we've had some good discussions with EDS already on making some changes to the layout already. And they've incorporated some of those requests. I've been fortunate to be engaged quite heavily with the minor ball group as well for the last year and a half. And they're really excited. And I think that's the key. This facility needs to address the minor ball situation. We've kind of moved them out to Vision Park, wanting that to encompass our main facility for ball, away from Griffiths Park, repurpose some of those areas. And they're excited about this plan. I'm going to talk to them. Is really minor ball is their future. Our Slopage League is very healthy right now. We're 35 to 40 teams of average 10 to 15 players. But minor ball's their future. And a lot of the kids that I play ball against now in the men's league in the Slopage League were those minor ball players that have come up to our system. They're excited, they're engaged, and I think it will just grow the minor ball, which in turn will grow our Slopage Leagues. And that's the whole purpose of this. We're very healthy already. We want to make sure that we sustain that.
Go ahead. Okay.
Thanks, Alan. And through the chair to the mayor, I'll just add it briefly. One of the things that I noted most in the user feedback was that users would prefer higher quality diamonds over a quantity of diamonds, and that's how I feel as a user. Going from 24 diamonds to 13 may seem like a big change, but as noted in the presentation, there was 4 or 5 at least of those diamonds that I don't think I've seen a game of Slopage on in my 5 or 6 years in the community. And then even further to go a little bit beyond that, I'd much rather wait my turn for a very high quality diamond than play on mediocre diamond. And some of those playing surfaces, as wonderful as Vision Park has been, they're certainly showing their age and condition. And it seems the users generally agree with that parameter as well. We're very fortunate as users to have as many access to as many diamonds as we have over the years. And for where we are now and where I think the foreseeable future is, this plan I think fits very well with the users.
Okay, Guy, you have a follow-up?
Yeah, I would like to just add through the chair to council. This plan exceeds the requirements of our needs. The current needs would be 12 diamonds, minimum 12 diamonds to maintain our current ball load. So this would allow us growth in the ability to host tournaments.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Byer.
Thank you. Through the chair to everybody, probably directed to administration. So we have directed administration to change the level of grass that's been mowed around the town. How does this plan affect that and affect it with operational costs as well? What would be your anticipation?
Sure. Again, we'll do that evaluation. 2020 was not a good year to implement that. With COVID, a lot of the ball was shut down here. We maintained very minimal diamonds out there, just for some recreational uses out there. The infields have to be maintained. The quality, because it makes for good quality, it makes it safe out there. The outfields, the outer areas, when we say outfields, I mean the outer areas outside the ball diamonds can be the part of that evaluation, and we can probably do some reduced cutting in those areas. Again, but the ball diamonds themselves need to be maintained for safety.
Yeah, I would add that too. I think the council could anticipate as parks starts to grade different green spaces, A, B, C, D, and then they receive a certain amount of maintenance, that sports playing fields would be their own kind of category. So the soccer fields and the various ball diamonds would be categorized that way. I don't anticipate that having a huge impact because we're basically maintaining all those spaces at that level currently.
Councillor Swanson.
Right through the chair to John, I believe. I'm just wondering about the capacity of this new design. I assume it would still be a regionally significant park. Would it still have the capacity to hold provincial level tournaments? Would it still have the capacity to hold national level tournaments? Is there certain thresholds that you need to reach to hold those kinds of events?
Through the chair to respond to that, what the threshold is, there really is no magic answer. Although there are communities like, for example, Fort McMurray that did the Western Canadian Summer Games with 6 diamonds. You do have the ability to do it in a smaller scale. It just has a larger duration of a tournament or of a spread. Having the number of diamonds that you do, 24 is the largest we've encountered in our 20 years as a consulting firm. 16 is the largest that we've encountered as a consulting firm in 20 years. So you are still maintaining an exceptional collection of diamonds that can be used and have the flexibility. The other very key thing here is that you have, for example, if you go to places in Vancouver, I think it's called Ball City as an example, they have 5 diamonds and they host nationals. They're exceptional diamonds. But the challenge is they're all different orientations, and so there's always one that if you're jam packing an event, you've got some people, some batters staring into the sun. With the number of diamonds you do have, it allows you to pick and choose prime orientations for prime games. Maybe some of the early on games happens on the less ideal diamonds. So to summarize, you're moving forward with 13 slow pitch. With the addition of 4 other diamonds that are still, can be used for slow pitch, you're still one of the largest that we've seen.
Councillor Curry.
Through the chair, to John, you had mentioned that you wanted the phases in 3 phases. Is your recommendation to do that fast? Is that like a yearly phase? You had at one point said over 20 years. What is your recommendation for the phasing?
Through the chair, to respond to the phasing, I don't really have a recommendation for you, only because once we get phase 1 done, the rest of the diamonds are still useful. You still have 17 useful diamonds after phase 1. All we're doing is we're improving upon the quality of the diamonds in phase 2 and 3. So there is no pressure. I'm not saying if you don't do all 3 phases, boy, you're going to have a really poor facility. You're going to have an exceptional facility after phase 1. Phase 2 and 3 is all about tweaking diamonds to bring them to standard. So in the 2nd and 3rd phase, that is taking some diamonds that don't quite have the right fence distance. They might be 210 feet instead of 225. To ball players, it's noticeable, but it's not going to stop tournaments. So again, this is going to be predicated by your financial capacity to do it. Typically, though, when you have a master plan, if you don't do things within 10 years, then they collect dust and never get done. So just from an experience perspective, it's great to say third year or the third phase, we'd love to see it in 10 years, but that's certainly not the case here. You can build phase one and you can still host some pretty great events.
And Councillor Wilkinson.
I have a question for John and Al, I think. We live really in a very generous community, and I wondered, with your group there, do you have to do the work all yourself, or would you consider in-kind donations, say upgrading or share or anything like that to cut our costs down?
Through the chair, those are always opportunities and options.
Okay,
Once we get more of the detailed plan and design, we can explore that.
okay, it doesn't all have to be done by this group, I guess, is what I meant.
That's correct. I know Minor Hall indicated at one point last year, there may have been opportunities for some funding through this sport fleet and all that stuff.
Good.
And we'll explore all those opportunities. There's no doubt we'll try and figure out as best we can to fund this.
Okay, and June's money for grandstands. I asked you to take it to Fires Martin or whatever, I still want to use that money. Okay, thank you.
First, I thought I'm not draining the bank account. My question is, how soon will we have costs? Like John's thing, that was a good question. It was one of the questions I had. So if we do phase one, how soon would we get costs on this? Like an estimated cost would it cost to complete phase one?
I believe that was answered earlier this evening.
2.3 was,
Yeah.
okay, that was only for phase one.
Yeah.
So then my question would be to do 2 and 3 then. Like to do the total package.
Yeah, again, the report, the final master plan, kind of outline a lot of those parameters. Once we get that master plan, will kind of give us an estimate per diamond as how we want to move forward.
Go ahead, Councillor Thornton.
Through the chair to administration as well as to John, I was encouraged to hear the concept of using naturally vegetated areas for stormwater management as well as for just minimizing the amount of maintenance required. So I am looking forward to maximizing that concept in the final draft. Thank you.
Okay. Are we all done with questions? Thank you, John, for joining us, your report, and we will look forward to further information coming. So thank you very much.
Thank you and good night, everybody.
Okay, thanks. Okay, we'll move on to that would be executive office vacation pilot program. Who's bringing that forward to us?
Yes, thank you. So last time we talked about this, we discussed the fact that for out of scope staff that we are not competitive. We're at the 42.7 percentile looking at the 2019 data. The general consensus around this table, or what I heard, is that we were generally comfortable with the idea of targeting staff compensation, base salary around the 50th percentile, and then finding other ways to exceed that target, finding other ways to be more competitive, ways that are more efficient, more cost efficient, and provide less of a burden on the taxpayer. What you have before you tonight is our best idea. I think that it will dramatically increase our compensation offering, and it will cost the taxpayers nothing. Beyond that, I don't have much to say except to say that I eagerly anticipate your feedback. Just a couple of reminders as we discuss this. Number one, we're talking about out of scope staff only, so sometimes we're directing the questions that we just need to remember that point. And number two, this is a pilot program. So at the outset, the idea is to test this out. The point of a pilot is to see how things go, see if there's anything we didn't anticipate, make any tweaks, and so at the end of the day, at the end of the 2 year, which is what we're forecasting for now, at the end of those 2 years, we can take a look at this and say, has this been a good thing? Has it achieved what it's supposed to? And has the benefits outweigh the pitfalls? aside from that, I look forward to your feedback.
Okay, anyone have any questions? Mr. Mayor, I guess you're quicker. Councillor Byer, I've seen the hand go up first.
Thank you. To the chair, to Colin, thank you for bringing this back. I know it's certainly probably in the public's mind a not very pleasant thing to discuss, and I believe that the direction that we gave before was accurate. And I know when I first read it, I was surprised at 35 vacation days. That was a bit of a shock. But I suppose when you add that up and you're looking at educating people to find the right fit, then that probably isn't out of line. I did have a question though on vacation liability, that 274,000. So is that something that is sitting in an account right now, or how in a special reserve for
Yes. So,
vacation payouts? Or?
I might ask our GM of Corporate Services to correct me if I say anything out of turn here. That is basically sitting there. It's money that's you would sort of consider it money spent. I guess would be a good way of putting that. No. Go ahead, please. Sorry.
Through the chair, it's what's called a funded liability account. So the money has been put aside as a liability of the town and owed to the employees. So it's sitting on our books as a liability against our assets. Therefore, it's actually is what it was considered funded. The money is put aside for that for when we pay out that vacation.
Yes, you have.
Okay, so to the chair to Sarah, then that money, if we go to a pilot project, then what happens to that money?
That would be another discussion that we'd have after we decide to go to the pilot program. I think it needs to be there, but there's something else to add.
Thank you. So one of the elements of the program is that we would transition to, in addition to the offering of this generous vacation program, a use it or lose it program rather than an accrual system. And so what that means is that there would be no future liability. The town wouldn't owe employees as they accrue vacation. And we're recommending as for consideration of perhaps the cleanest way to start that program would be to end the current liability, which means that the current accruals that would be on the books would be then paid out to the employees as time that they have already earned and that we technically owe them. And then from that point on, the town would no longer accrue a liability in the future.
Thank you.
Okay, and Mr. Mayor, you're up.
Councillor Byer asked my question, so.
Oh, okay. Councillor Sorensen and then Burke.
Thank you through the chair to the administration. I hesitate to ask, but is there a number, like an average number of vacation days that you can say currently those staff would hold? Like, are we going from 30 to 35? Or are we going from 25 to 35?
Yes. Thank you through the chair. 1 second, please. Just pull up that data. I can tell you exactly what the average is. Oops. Oh, here we go. It's just showing it right. 1 second. Okay. So currently, the average employee has a 24-day accrual. This spans the gap. Some people have 15 days, quite a few people have 20 days, and then a great deal of people are hovering between that 20 and 25. The average person will therefore see an extra 11 days of vacation
per year as a part of that, and that would be the equivalent of giving the average staff member a 4% overall compensation increase.
Did you say 4?
4%.
Councillor Swenson, I believe you had a question. Or sorry, Curry.
Do you have a follow-up?
Sure, I have a follow-up, through the chair to the administration. You said before this is at no cost, so I'm just wondering how you go from 24 to 35 days without a cost. That means there's 11 days of someone not at their desk, so you have to fill it with somebody else.
Through the chair, I would suggest that the data and the research that I've provided suggests that increasing time off actually increases overall productivity. It doesn't decrease it. Does that mean that people have to get better and more efficient to make that work? Yes, it does. It's not to me a question as to whether we have the assumption right now that somebody can be away for 35 days and still be per year and still be productive and efficient. Our current compensation program already assumes that because there are already people who are there. What our current compensation program assumes, and what many do, I would take issue with, is the notion that it takes you that many years to get to the point where you can actually accomplish that. We did run a focus group with employees to get their feedback. A couple of the things that we heard: one, we love the community investment phase and the ability to have some extra time to give back to the community. But two, there was general consensus that if this is going to work, we're going to need to make it work, and we're going to need to grow and become better and become more efficient. And that's not a bad thing.
If I may just add to that as well, a couple of elements to the cost. Part of this is when we refer to this as a no-cost option, we're referring specifically to the monetary cost. There's not additional dollars that need to be invested in this. I think I would just reinforce what Colin said in terms of overall productivity. We anticipate this being a general positive rather than a drain on that. And part of this is with this being the out-of-scope staff, it's not quite the same as some of our field staff where there's a person on a piece of equipment, there's just that many hours on the equipment and you get that much done. At the management level, it's work and time and space in a different way, and so we don't anticipate for the most part significant impacts there. However, we do recognize that we will need to learn, and that's why we're referring to it as a pilot program as well, where we may come across some friction points that we aren't anticipating at this point. But in the big picture, no, we don't anticipate that these absences will impact service delivery, which is obviously the key element there.
Okay, Councillor Curry.
Through the chair, at what point now do you reach 35 days? How many years of service?
Ooh, that's a big question. I think that would be the 25-year mark. I'll have to go back and check that. It's quite a while.
Councillor Meyer.
Through the chair to administration. So right now, if we're aiming for the out-of-scope employees to be in that 50th percentile, how does this, the 35 vacation days, how would that show, like where are we compared to other people? Like how, I don't know if you have that information. Does anybody else have this that we would be in a competitive situation with?
Thank you, through the chair. There are a few questions in there, all worth answering, I think. One, we are at the 42.7% percentile right now, looking at 2019. So we are not competitive, and say that. Given our location as well, even if we were at 50th percentile, it's still difficult to compete at that level. So this is, we envision this with the idea that council would move us to the 50th percentile, and this would be the way that we help bridge the gap. It is difficult because of the data and the numbers, and I went back and reached back to our consultant, it is very difficult for us to say, hey, if we do this, then we will virtually be at X percentile. And believe me, I tried because I really wanted to be able to bring you that data. But I would suggest that this makes us significantly more competitive for not just because of the compensation offering, but because something like this says what kind of employer we are. It adds, it paints a bit of a narrative about who we are, what our employer brand is, right? If we were just to go to the 65th percentile on wages alone, but underperform on benefits, we might be saying, hey, we value the labor, we value this, but we don't really value these other pieces. What we're really saying is a couple of things. One, we really value that we're hiring a whole person. We really value that we're hiring people who need that work-life balance. Two, we're also saying that we are willing to be innovative. We're willing to be a bit courageous in terms of exploring. To answer your question about what other municipalities are doing, they're basically doing what we do. Everyone we've surveyed, everyone we talk to, but overall, in terms of the big picture, the paradigm on vacation is shifting, and people are coming around to the notion that the old assumptions just don't make any sense. Most people don't stay with an employer for 25 or 30 years. It just doesn't work that way. People generally, if you stay with an employer for 5 or 10 years, you've got a particularly good run. The reason I included the piece about Kronos and their open vacation program was not to say, hey, because this isn't an open vacation program or an unlimited vacation program, but to show the mindset and how that is changing. We're talking about a paradigm shift. So, and that is changing rapidly in the private sector, and I assume sooner or later that's going to hit here as well.
So we have a question.
Councillor Curry.
Through the chair, I don't have a question, I'm just gonna make a comment. And I'm sure no one at the table will be surprised by my comment. I'm in support of this. One, because I do think the liability is a big deal. But I do believe that this is a direct cost saving because I think you will see a difference in life-work balance, which will automatically decrease our benefits in sick leave. And in research of myself that I've done in my other world, that has been shown over and over and over. So what we give in vacation is almost always decreased in what we pay out in sick leave. So I would love to pilot this for 2 years, but part of that pilot is I would like to see that correlation with our benefits. So I would like to, if we were to do that, I want to see, did we see a decrease in our benefits? I don't know if our benefits fund, if we can do that, but I think that we would actually see that. I think that this is, and it has been shown in so many different studies, that giving people more time away from work has always made them more efficient when they're at work. So kudos to you guys for bringing this forward. We asked you to bring something really forward thinking and big forward, and this is. And I think this is demonstrating that we're courageous and willing to get with the times, because the companies that are the most sought out and where people want to work, this is what they want. And if you were to ask me, I would take holidays over a pay raise any day, any day.
Thank you. Councillor Wilkinson.
I just have talked about this in the community since it came out, and the people I've talked to just can't believe even that we would think of doing this, because it's a gift of the year off, and people just aren't doing that in Edson at this time. The most I talked to had 5 weeks vacation, and I still have questions about what the raises were for the last 3 years, as well as this 4% now, and how it correlates with the other employees that work in the same building. I think you said it gives a narrative of what employers we are, and I think it does. We have to be careful that we aren't an employer that is totally out of step with other employers in Edson.
Do you have a comment to that, or?
No, thank you.
Okay, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, through the chair. We're not competing with other employers in Edson. We're competing with municipalities across the province, across Canada. The numbers show that we are at a 42.7 percentile. We are not competitive. We've had difficulties attracting people in the recent years, and I think this would be a huge attraction to people looking for a career. We have talked a lot around this table about ensuring that we value our employees, and that's not through compensation necessarily. And I think this is the comment about worrying about the whole person is so important. Times are changing. This is not things are changing drastically year by year. This year, with what's happened with COVID, the entire workplace is changing with people working from home and online, and that's going to probably change workflows and workplaces for decades to come. And we need to show some leadership on this. We need to attract high quality individuals. And I think that the numbers show that we are far behind on out of scope and management. And I'm in support of trying this on a trial period to see how it goes, to see if it accomplishes the things that we want it to accomplish. After the pilot program, we can reassess at that time and decide whether or not it is worth that investment. I think it is. I know that I work for an employer that shows great flexibility for me, and I always go above and beyond. If that means I have to work late to get that job done, I get that job done. And we've seen that here with going to a 0.9 schedule, people working late in order to have that last day off or that Friday off. And yeah, I think we have to keep in mind we're not competing with other Edson employers. We're competing with other municipalities right across this country.
Go ahead, Mike.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Through to council, just one piece that I think is really, really important to always keep in mind when we begin discussing what I think everyone would acknowledge is a sensitive topic, right? Compensation of the people that work here who work on behalf of the public. And I just want to ensure that council it can be confident in the fact that this policy is specifically designed to produce better outcomes for the taxpayers in a couple of key areas. And so this is not about, while we care about our staff and we want them to be healthy and we think this is a part of that, it's bigger and goes beyond that. We believe this makes us a better organization. And what's our organizational purpose? It's to provide quality services to the taxpayer. And this is a concept that I don't want to be lost as we're talking about that tough subject of how people are compensated. But administratively, we firmly believe that this is a policy that is in the best interest of the taxpayers of Edson.
Okay, I'm going to do a comment here. On the 35, I was very shocked. So there's two sides of looking at. We can change. My fear is right now, I don't know if it's the same between, let's say, the union employees and the management. Are we on the same scale, like the old way of going 5 years, you get 2 weeks in sliding scale? Right now, are we equal or close to equal?
Yes, basically right now we are following the same format. Out of scope employees generally receive an extra week in lieu of overtime. But yes, we're following the same progression.
Okay, well then the backlash to, as you move forward with change, if we're doing this, so I believe it was asked, then you got to be a 25-year employee to reach this goal, approximately. So yes, we're trying to get employees in, but how do I go to a 25-year employee and say, geez, sorry, I just brought somebody in new and they automatically get 35. With that said, instead of giving raises, and what I'm hearing in the room, it's good, then we could go to employees and say, if time off is more important than more money, then we could offer it to other employees. I'm just trying to be fair. You're singling out one person. I understand why we're doing it, but how do I tell those longtime loyal employees that, you know what, if it's only 5 years, then maybe you should move on and go to a different town? Is I'm, playing both sides of the coin. I value every employee here. Some are 1 year, and we have employees that are getting close to 40 years this town's seen. So when we say we're hard time getting employees, I look around our town and we seem to fill all the roles pretty good. And when we're always comparing percentiles, we have to remember we are Edson. So Edson as a whole, even though you get a similar town somewhere else, may not compare. So I believe if the employees aren't happy here, regardless of the role, if they're running their grader, and we've had people before move to Spruce Grove for different reasons. So the 35 years would be something hard to sell in my eyes to the employee that's been here 25 years plus, and they haven't reached that goal yet. It's just my comment on that.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It's always tough when there's a paradigm shift. That yes, the old assumption was that you had to earn your way to reach this, and I can understand why that initial conversation with someone might be difficult. We need to keep in mind that our focus here is on the taxpayer, and we are writing on the assumption that we're going on the premise that our objective is to give the taxpayer the biggest bang for their buck. It is better for the taxpayer to have the highest quality employees we can find. It is similarly beneficial to the taxpayer that we keep costs under control. This is going to benefit a great deal of employees, but that, and I would say the majority, if we were to go do a poll, which we didn't, would be pretty happy with this overall, but that's not our objective. That's not our target. Is we're looking at long-term, how do we attract the best possible talent for the best possible dollar. As for the union, it's a different paradigm. Their wages are negotiated, ours are not. They are eligible for overtime, we are not. I very much want us in the union to be playing for the same team as much as possible. It's just compensation is not a realistic way to recognize that in my professional opinion.
I don't know which one, Sorensen or, go ahead, Sorensen, and then Byron. Oh, sorry, Trevor, I haven't heard from, no, never mind, Trevor, this is my mistake. You're up, you haven't spoken much, go ahead.
Okay, I did read this and that, but my question is that the chair is talking to other places, like I was talking to some people in Calgary and had a family down there and working for some of these places. How is this going to work for the people that are working from home? I've heard from them that they're still employed fully with, say, a municipality or a city or that, but they're shifting and they're going to be working from home. And some of the places are giving them $1,500, $2,000 set up at home, but you're still employed for them, but you can work from home. Now, they have incorporated something like this here and that, and they're asking the same question now. Do I fall in that category, even though I have more freedom from home than what I do from coming in the office every day or whatever? How is that, will that affect this year? How was that affected?
Through the chair, this was, I suppose, a dynamic not at the top of our list because frankly, we don't have a great deal of employees working from home. This is something that we are doing only as a stopgap when we're self-isolating or on occasion, it is definitely not the norm, so that is not a significant consideration, hasn't been a significant consideration in this process.
I just wonder if it ever gets to that point that we're, something happens.
I would just add to that, if I may, through the chair, that working from home and we would still want those employees, if we were in a situation like that, to be entitled to the same type of vacation as anyone else. And theoretically, as Colin said, that's not a situation we are currently in, and we are anticipating that being a growing part of our reality, and we're working towards expanding that. But we really see that as kind of working from home as a kind of a separate issue.
Yeah, just kind of wondering, because I know there's been questions been asked other places. I just want to know, like I have to realize it's not part of us right now, but if it ever did happen, it's something we should consider.
Through the chair, I would agree with the CAO's assessment that for people, if we did have people working at home more often, they would definitely, they would be just as eligible as anyone else. The expectation would be if you're at home working, and you need time off just as much as anyone else does.
Okay, thank you. Councilor Sorensen and then Byer.
Right, through the chair to administration, I'm in general support of this concept. I'm not so much to make to improve employee satisfaction with their job or sentiment or morale. I'm sure this will improve those things very much. My concern is calling it a pilot with because once we implement this, it'll be very hard to go back. So I would really like to stage this as like a test, so that we start it now and 2 years later we evaluate it, and we evaluate it with quantitative metrics. So my question, or I'm hoping that when it comes back to us for a vote, that you have metrics for 4 areas. How are you going to measure competitiveness? How are you going to measure productiveness? How are you going to measure the level of service, that make sure that didn't go down? And then the 4th one, did this cost extra or just dollars? If you can give me metrics that we're going to measure pre-implementation and then during, and then so that 2 years down the line, you can say productivity went up 10%, competitiveness went up 5%, because I'm not sure how you're going to measure competitiveness, number of applicants or something, I don't know. But that's how I would like to see it, because it's once we go down this path, if we don't stage it like a real study, it'll be very hard to come back.
Thank you.
Okay, go ahead.
Chair, can I ask the council to repeat the 4 criteria, because I like them and I was typing as you were.
Competitiveness, productivity, service levels, and cost.
Okay, go ahead, Mike.
If I may, thank you, Councilor Sorensen, and certainly administratively, we believe in evidence-based decision-making and work to gather evidence. I think that there will be some things that can be measurable and others that will be very difficult to measure, but I don't think that means we shouldn't attempt to best quantify that. And I would also add that some of that research, I would suggest, is already done quantitatively and has been provided. There's just myriads and myriads of academic level studies that have been peer reviewed at that level that confirm a lot of the pieces that will be in there. There's no way we're going to be able to provide better data or better research than some of those pieces. And so just to keep that in mind as we do capture data and learn from it and reflect on it, which I do think is a critical piece of a test or a pilot program.
Okay, I believe Councilor Meyer and then Wilkinson.
Thank you. Through the chair to administration. I am also in general support of this pilot project. From my own personal perspective, I have been in, I've had employers that are extremely flexible, and working overtime wasn't ever an issue, especially when I knew that I could get 1 p.m. to go and do something that was really, really important to me personally. So I can certainly see the value that any employee would have with that, having flexible time like this. I think it takes courage to do something like this, to be a leader in this. I think that there's enough studies to prove that it's effective, whether or not it seems like something that our town would be doing. I think that our town also employs people that high school diplomas that make $100,000 a year, and our organization is looking to employ people that have 4 or 5 or 6 year degrees and make much less than that. So I think that we have to also consider those options, and that's why I think this is a way that we can try to compensate and attract the people that we need to. We can't compete financially, and I don't think that that's a drive. I mean, I think having those service days in there as well, where when we're looking to attract people outside of our town to come to this organization that are qualified and that we're looking for. I think having someone who is in favor of helping out with the community I think that's also really important too. So I'm certainly in favor of a pilot. I like Councillor Sorensen's measures that you put in there. Maybe one that I'm not sure if you can mention in there or not, was I guess staff turnover, or how many days or weeks or how many positions we have in the out of scope positions that in previous to this that we've been unable to find a qualified person for, and then how that would change after. I would hope that
we would have a reduction in that as well.
Okay.
Okay, this is Chair, I just wanted to mention about the academic research, because thank you for putting this in, I appreciate it. But just as long as we all realize there's equally as much on the other side, on any type of academic research you do for any papers, so there is always research both ways.
Councillor Curry.
I think I would just add to with this coming back to us. One thing I would like to see, like if this comes back as a policy, is I do think just because so many of our out of scopes are out of different departments, there needs to be something in there about our leadership having some kind of joint scheduling for holidays. Just ensuring, because now when you're adding in that many more days, the risk of just making sure that we don't all of a sudden have all of our out of scope out of the office at the same time for an extended period of time. I think right now that's probably a low risk, and I think right now you probably do that within one department. But knowing that this does add those days, I think that there just needs to be something in that policy that scheduling of vacation is now done more at that organizational level to ensure we don't have a huge service gap, because that's a substantial difference.
Thank you. Through the chair. You're bordering on the edge of what I think is a really great question, which is, are we ready? For me, the question isn't, is this a good thing? It's are we ready yet? Have we established that level of trust within this organization that we can trust our managers, we can trust our staff to work with one another and continue to do what's best for the taxpayer, and to make sure we're not only providing, maintaining our service levels, but continuing to improve them under the new dynamic. The answer to that question for me is a resounding yes. I think this administration should be very proud of the staffing organization we've built. I think council should be very proud, and I think our staff should be very proud, because I've never worked in an organization like this. We can handle this, and we absolutely will work together. There are pieces in the policy I have drafted about that speak to that, but they speak to the principles, right? We absolutely do need, public works, for example. Won't work to have, 3 out of 4 public works managers all take off at the same time and leave one trying to manage everybody else's workload. They're going to have to work together on that. But I absolutely think that if we introduce this now, that will happen, and it will happen in a way that makes us all happy.
Go ahead, Mike.
Thank you. Through the chair, a few things I would just add to the comments. In my time here in the organization, it's been much more common for me to have to force people to take their vacation than to rein them in from taking their vacation. And there's all kinds of reasons and factors for that. And we mentioned a few times, and I think that one of the things that's really important is we're talking about changing the complete paradigm of how we view vacation, right? And moving away from evaluating under the old, in the current, and what I think is becoming an antiquated system. And one of those pieces is that we actually want the people to take the time. We want them to take the time. In the new paradigm, if you don't take the time, it goes away. So what does that encourage you to do? If you want to benefit from it, you actually use it. And so I really, really like that element of it. In the old system, kind of accruing and holding on to those, because they literally have a dollar amount associated with them, that people started to think about them as money rather than time off. And in the new model, we want people to think about them as flexibility, as time with their family, as their hobbies and their interests, and change the way that people view and think about that. And quite frankly, then, I was about to say me, not a problem I guess I would have in this organization chasing people to take their vacation anymore, but fine, under the new system, you don't want to take your vacation, great, don't. We're not accruing a financial liability. If work is where you want to be, obviously within the limits of what we're required to by law, then that's fine. I think we would find very quickly that people would change their perspective on how they view that, and that they would have a little bit of an improved perspective on what a healthy use of their vacation time looks like. And that to me is a really, really critical component of what we're trying to achieve here. Another thing I would just comment on is I'm a little surprised it hasn't come up yet, and maybe it's in the back of some of your minds or what's coming up there, but administratively, we're really, really excited about the idea of these community investment days. This idea that permitting and encouraging and enhancing the connection between our staff members and the community. I know that many of our staff are actively engaged in the community in a variety of different ways. But just imagine enhancing that and multiplying that and strengthening that, and also connecting the idea of the employer or the town of Edson as an organization actively contributing to all of the causes or organizations that are valuable in our people's lives. These are the things that I think are difficult to measure, but are really becoming critically important components of this. I think that is just a really, really, really wonderful part of this policy pilot program that we're proposing here. And we could see some really, I think, great things, not just inside our organization, but throughout the entire community as hopefully that becomes an even greater part of what our management team contributes to the community.
Go ahead, Mr. Mayor.
Yes, through to administration. Two questions. First, how did you come up with 35 days? And is it 35 plus 5, or is it 35 with the 5 investment days?
Thank you, through the chair. It would be 35 vacation days plus 5 community investment days. Sorry, the first question again.
How did you come up with 35 days?
How did we come up with 35 days? That's the top of our current chart. That is the top of most organizations' charts. And again, we're starting with the premise one that this is we're moving away from a monetary model where vacation days have a cash equivalent, but two, we're moving away from a model that assumes that you need to work for an organization for 25 years before you can handle that. It also assumes that we are trying to attract talented, qualified people who are not just starting out in the respective fields.
If we find that the conversation around the number of days or weeks associated with this was really so we want it to be a strategic and competitive advantage, and so we felt like, you know, at 6 weeks we're honestly hardly changing the game, hardly at all, and so we are suggesting that that is something that other professionals and other organizations would now have to look over their shoulders and be like, oh wow, either as a professional, I like that, I am attracted to that, and perhaps I would consider working there. But it's going to put pressure on competitors as well to consider that type of thing. And so we feel like it has to be pretty substantial relative to the quote unquote norms, that 6 weeks kind of average, if we want to get that competitive piece that comes along with it.
Get your follow-up.
Yeah, and through the administration, I think that we have to realize we're either going to be spending money or we're going to be doing something like this in order to attract these individuals. Because as time goes on, we are falling further and further behind. 35 plus 5 seems to me a bit excessive. And I would like to see with the community investment days, which I think is a brilliant idea, and I think it really will help our community to ensure that the criteria on that is well defined on what community investment days is, and what we expect and how that's tracked and how that is quantified. You know, I wouldn't suggest that people will abuse that, but there's always that opportunity. So we want to make sure that you know, that a community investment day is a community investment day in Edson, not a community investment day going down to Calgary to do something. I think those types of things are key to have in policy. to make sure that everybody knows the rules of the game.
Go ahead.
Thank you. Through the chair, if I may, the policy I have drafted specifically says it needs to be to help organizations that serve the town of Edson specifically. So it is to serve this community.
Anyone else have any questions or concerns? Okay, then seeing none, thank you for your presentation. And
Just perhaps just to be clear
Oh.
before we come by, based on the conversation, I think we would have general support to bring this forward for formal consideration. Incorporating, of course, the feedback.
Casey got 6 yes and 1 no.
Thank you very much.
Okay, then our next one would be community protection would be E4, and that would be Mrs. Lemieux.
Nope.
Sorry,
nope.
Mr. Chair, actually,
Oh, I missed one.
E2.
Oh, E2. Okay, sorry. I knew you were coming up for a reason. Go ahead.
Just the screen share signature.
Sorry, because technology has changed in the last little while. Mr. Chair, members of council, I'm beginning to think I should come out of retirement because there's some great vacation policy.
See, I was right. We'll up it to 41.
Great. So over the course of the next few months, it is our intention and planning to bring forth some different parts of the land use bylaw and to bring them forth for conversation and for information and at times for direction. So our land use bylaw is actually, I'm very, very old, like at least 15 years old plus. And we're looking around at our neighboring municipalities, and many of them have new bylaws or in the process of getting new bylaws. So we are intending on doing a land use bylaw review in 2021. So the purpose of bringing forth different sections is actually for feedback and to start the conversation. So tonight I decided to bring owner occupied to the council and just to try to explain some of the challenges we're facing with owner occupied. So in 2010, there was an amendment made to our land use bylaw, and it allowed for owner occupied suites. The reason that this amendment was made, if memory serves me correctly, was that Edson was facing a real housing pressure, like housing pressures. So if you recall, when we presented our offsite levy development values, 2010 was our highest in the last 10 years. So the economy was strong and housing was short. So council was faced with trying to bring on some different housing initiatives or perhaps options, and one was to bring owner occupied. Council of the day they knew that they could look at either secondary suites or owner occupied suites. They were concerned that secondary suites would change the characteristics of our single family neighborhoods. However, if the suites were owner occupied, they felt there was greater oversight and therefore the characteristics of our single family neighborhoods would be maintained. So the land use bylaw was amended and owner occupied was created. So owner occupied was added as a discretionary use in several residential land use districts. So in an R1B, R1C, and so if a home in a single family neighborhood wanted to apply for owner occupied use, the development permit would be applied for, and the adjacent landowners would be notified.
hey, there's a development permit application for owner occupied, and we would take in the comments of adjacent landowners, and based on those comments, we would make a decision as to whether or not it would be approved or denied. So in order, the challenge comes in that at the time that the development permit is issued, it's quite easy to determine if it's owner occupied. You have the land title, you have the utility account, so you can confirm that this home is owner occupied and the owner will live in a part of the home, and then the tenant would live in another part of the home. The challenge comes up when this property sells. So a purchaser will purchase a home, will, come in, oh, there's a suite, it will help with my mortgage payments, and really never really consider that there's this clause of owner occupied. So if the home is no longer owner occupied, the suite must be discontinued. So the challenges are at the development end. We, in the few months that I have been here, I have dealt with 2 complaints. So the complaints are, hey, this place is no longer owner occupied. You gotta, what are you gonna do about it? So we take the approach of, first of all, we have to try to determine whether or not it is owner occupied or not. So it often involves, correspondence with the owners, and often, more often than not, the owners remain silent. So the complaint is still there. We know that if it's not owner occupied, the suites have to be discontinued. The mechanism that we have to employ to discontinue these suites, we have no choice but to go to a stop order. And then a stop order will lead to a court order, which will lead to eviction. So those are the challenges with owner occupied suites. So we, decided let's always go look at what our neighbors are doing. And we took a look at Drayton, Hinton, and Whitecourt. All 3 municipalities allow for secondary suites. So some allow for internal and external, which is kind of interesting. So if you have a garage, which is heated and has plumbing, sometimes those are, you can have a suite in a garage, and it would be considered an external suite. But there was no owner occupied, and we haven't found it. If it exists, it's not to be found on the World Wide Web. So at this point, how do we proceed? We can leave things as they are. So we know that they're owner occupied, and continue to try to deal with the challenges when there's a complaint filed. We could amend the land use bylaw, replacing owner occupied with secondary suites. So it could be an amendment to the land use bylaw. If we do that, we would also have to create a policy that would guide us on how to transition. And the other big concern that has been raised from infrastructure is that there are some segments in our community that our infrastructure cannot handle additional density. So there's that challenge also. And lastly, we could wait for the land use bylaw rewrite. I've been giving this considerable thought, and I think that in my professional opinion, this might be a really good option. And the reason for that is during the land use bylaw rewrite, we will be garnering a lot of public feedback. And it would be interesting to know, to hear from our neighborhoods, what do they want for their neighborhoods? But yeah, so I'm here tonight to discuss the issue, and if council has direction, to certainly try to implement some of that direction.
Okay, Councillor Wilkinson.
To the chair. Didn't we have a huge discussion about this once with all the public in here about the secondary suites? Rob Pelkey in particular, I remember. And it was just a big deal, and all the parking issues that came with it. So I think you've dealt with this for a long time on different aspects, so do whatever you think's the best.
And do consider 41 days. I think I'm just going to go all the way around. Crystal, because you all put your hand at the same time. So Councillor Byer.
Through the chair to administration or Bridget. So the owner occupied is, I just want to make sure I understand the definitions properly. I know when I was reading it, I was certainly a little bit confused. So owner occupied is the person who owns the property, lives in that house, whether it's a condo or apartment or a bungalow or whatever type of house that it is. And there's a portion of that house that they're renting a room out, or is this where it is a separate entrance? Is there like a definition difference between that and then the secondary suite would be a separate entrance or the garage type of scenario? I'm just curious about the definition lines for these two.
Mr. Chair, through to Councilor Byer. So the land use bylaw does not go into those specifics of, the definition of owner occupied, other than that it has to be owner occupied. So the owner's name must appear on title. But it could be, I have not, we've done a little bit of research of the permits that have been issued, and they have all been within homes. So not within an apartment, and it's not, it has not been the renting of a room either. It would be a self-contained suite.
Okay, then Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, through to Bridget. This brings back fine memories of 2010 when things were awesome, and our biggest concern is not having enough housing. We have the exact opposite issue. So it's funny how things change, and I think you really summed it up quite correctly. It was to address an issue. At that time, we had big problems with owner occupied suites being rented out, causing major issues in our neighborhoods. And I think that the feedback we heard at that time from the neighborhoods is that they were fine with these suites as long as the owner was on that property. Obviously, things have changed. I think that we should wait as a part of the land use bylaw review to see what kind of feedback we would have from our community at this time. Enforcement is going to always be an issue. I know that this is probably pretty much really hard to do on the enforcement side the way it's set up right now. But at the same time, I don't think this is a major issue in our community, but something that we do need to look at. And I don't think waiting another year or so as we do that land use bylaw review would be detrimental. And I think it would give us some time to kind of wrap our heads around this issue. I do see that I think some neighborhoods would definitely be concerned that we'd be making a switch here to just a secondary suite, but I don't know what other choice we would have. And at the same time, we also, I think we need to be considerate of people that do own these homes. Those are revenue income generating suites, and that might be their only source of income during these difficult times. So all things that we need to consider, but it's a major policy issue that I think we should take our time on.
To respond, Councillor Curry.
Through the chair. Thank you, Bridget. I want to say thank you for this approach of bringing the bylaw to us in segments for us to discuss leading up to that change. Being on one of the subdivision committees there, it is huge. And I think this will be a really great approach for us to kind of get our feet into it and not try to when that comes to us as a whole. So thank you for that. I like the recommendation of waiting. Just because I do think that this is a big one where we do need some community feedback. I think there's some in there that we won't see a lot of community feedback for, but I think this is one where we will definitely see a lot of community feedback. So I like the idea. We've started the conversation, even if we can just kind of start talking about that within the community to get a little feedback, but leaving it for that overall change in 2021.
Okay. Councillor Bevins.
Through the chair and Bridget, yeah, we had this kind of same discussion previous council too as council before, and I like to wait till the rewrite in 21. And I also like to see what the feedback is too. I think we need feedback from the residents moving forward in that. And as the mayor said, we've had some non-occupied suites out there and that. Sometimes they've been a problem, sometimes they haven't. But I know in previous years, bylaw has had a problem trying to sort that out too and everything else. So they get somebody complaining on that, they seem to go back and forth, back and forth, and back and forth. So I'm glad we're gonna wait here and bring it forward 2021.
Councillor Sorensen. Through the chair to administration, so I am ready to implement change. I don't think we should wait. I believe we could ask for public feedback on this one particular item. We would wait to ask for feedback on the entire land use bylaw. My primary concern when I see these suites in the community is safety. Many of them right now have very little concern for fire code or for occupant safety. Electrical rewiring by owners, plumbing rerouting. There's some serious safety concerns, and I don't think we should wait. So I know in the proposal it talked about potentially asking for engineering confirmation. I don't think we need to go to an engineer, but I do believe these suites should be inspected by a fire chief, by an electrician, and by a plumber. And I do the other aspect of them is we need to monitorize it, because there's additional costs for administrating these suites from the town point of view, and as well as a service load on our utility. So I would be interested in looking at either annual permits for the suites, or potentially putting something on the utility bill, or somehow notifying the assessor that this is a commercially viable suite that's generating revenue, so that they become assessed at appropriate value. There's properties in town that have extremely low assessments without the assessor knowing that it's chalked up to 2 or 3 suites. And so it's not being assessed at appropriate values. So I made a lot of comments, but I am ready to move forward now, and I think with public feedback, obviously. Thank you.
Okay, I will ask. Go ahead, your feedback.
Mr. Chair, through to Councillor Swanson, I should probably just clarify what I meant by requiring engineering confirmation that infrastructure can accommodate. So there are areas of town where our sanitary sewer or our water is at capacity, and therefore in those areas of town we do not want to increase our density. So if we go forward with some sort of a change, we have to make sure that every permit application is referred to our engineering department, so they can review and they can provide their professional opinions as to whether or not density should increase.
So if I may add to that, so that's the internal engineering review, not an external engineering review as well. And I would just add to that, one of the reasons that we have these capacity issues, there's a number of. One is that they were designed, many of them, for 100 years ago, that had a lot of different profiles for a community and water use and all the things that are associated with that. But the truth is that there are both known and unknown suites of this nature throughout our community now. This is not a preventative exercise. This is quite frankly, we have a little bit of a mess going on. How do we better structure ourselves to deal with, respond to, understand, and service the situation that exists, which is many single family homes in our community now being used as 2 or 3 residences, and or even those that are single family homes in nature, but renting out those rooms even individually, like that proposes challenges. The infrastructure capacity being chief among them. And I think that's a critical component that must be reviewed as part of this. And when that comes back, I think it will show that we actually don't have hardly any capacity to permit additional density in all of our residential neighborhoods. That shouldn't be too alarming because, as I said, it's basically already happening. This would just allow us to manage it more effectively moving forward and to address it appropriately. I will say administratively, I share Councillor Sorensen's concern with the building codes not being applied or understood in some of these situations. That is one of the major considerations should be public safety and for the residents that are occupying some of these suites. For all that are dangerous, I'm sure there's many that are done appropriately or safely as well. But right now we have no way of knowing, we have no way of managing and or ensuring that we are properly providing oversight.
Okay, Mr. Mayor, if I recall through the chair to administration, when we dealt with this in 2010, that was major concern was the safety aspect. And that's why we decided to do what we did. So we would actually have the ability to make sure that the suites were meeting code. Were those suites ever referred to that to safety codes when the permit came through? I know there was a number of suites that were done way before that we had no idea. But any of the ones that did come through the town in post 2010, would that have been referred to safety codes at all?
Go ahead. Yes, it is. It was either placed as a condition that they required a building permit, but of late they place it as a note on the development permit. So one of the questions I was anticipating is how many permits have we issued? And we have hardly issued any. In 10 years, we've issued 11.
So through to administration. So right now these suites are, with the exception of the 11, they are illegal in our community.
That is correct.
So so that changes my perspective on this quite frankly. So right now we have a whole bunch of suites that are illegal. They have not gone through the appropriate process. So by doing this, will this actually give us an enforcement tool? And are we willing to go the distance on that enforcement tool? Because we are going to be dealing literally with dozens upon dozens of these suites, or how, as you put a transition to get these suites into proper safety codes or into proper approval process.
That is the huge dilemma. Actually, what will the transition look like? And I'm not exactly positive, because in order, so we can't force people to come in and get a development permit for their suites. So they will continue to exist. There will be some people that will come in, but those that are deemed illegal because they don't have permits, we are faced with eviction.
Go ahead, do a follow-up.
I'm sorry, kind of taking the time here, but if that is what we're going to need to do anyway, I'm I guess a little confused why would even change anything if that's the road we have to go down, and are we willing to go down that road? And do we have the courage to go down that road? Because there's going to be a significant amount of blowback, and what is our capacity internally to ensure that these, because we don't have our own building inspector, we do rely on the province to do that for us and private. Is this all just a moot point at this point in time? And is at the end result, is it going to be a court order anyway?
Mr. Chair, through to Councilor Members Sarah, I actually think that it's a step in the right direction. So if you are going to get a development permit to build a house, one of the conditions or a note on the permit is that you're going to need a building permit. So we ask for a copy of the permit, but it's not a condition, and therefore if for some reason the property owner doesn't provide us, we don't go to safety codes, we don't ask for it. So we are encouraging people to make their suites legal and safe. So if they choose not to apply for a development permit, then I guess the intention here is to just get some, like, try to get more compliance in our suite issue in this community.
I would,
Go ahead, Mike.
thank you through the chair. There is some passive enforcement mechanisms that come into play as well here. Well, I think the ultimate outcome is evictions. That's not, I don't want to give the picture that if you go down this road, this means that, you know, we're tossing people out on the street there. That would only be if people were unwilling to make them legal, which means make them safe. And if they're not safe, we wouldn't want people living in them anyway, theoretically. So that's something to consider. And the other part of it is what can be done as well. And with one of the situations we've encountered recently is, in many of these situations, these properties have changed hands multiple times. And people have purchased, oh boy, there's 3 suites in there, I'm gonna rent them all out and make a whole bunch of money. And then they go on to sell it and they come in to do the right thing. Right, and so now you're gonna punish the person who's doing the right thing by saying, actually you have a non-conforming property, so we can't give you a compliance letter. And that it makes real estate transactions incredibly challenging. And so we're creating some unfortunate realities as we continue with the current situation. And so where I'm going with that is that the passive mechanism can be to say, okay, fine, well, we're just going to put a stop order on the property. We're not going to do anything more than that. But if you go and try and sell your property, people are going to see and know that there is something that is non-conforming or non-compliant. And so that's when you would start to get compliance as part of it. It's certainly effective. It just takes more time as it happens when properties change hands. But this would all be part of a transition plan. That would be part of it. It would certainly be in a relatively intensive process requiring some staff time as part of it. But I also think a time frame under which we would allow people to come in without penalty and all those types of things and properly communicated, and as much as a year long, perhaps even depending on how we wanted to structure that. If the intent is to try to get them to be known, to get them to be properly permitted, and to get them to be safe. That can be done, and it can be done under a passive permitting process, or sorry, passive enforcement process. And as Ms. Lemieux suggested, I think what I would say is, let's get closer to what we'd like to see, and we can always take more steps down the road as we progress through that.
Through the chair, again, referring back to that meeting when the gallery was full, I remember a lady crying. She bought a house with a suite. She had no idea that it was an illegal suite or it wasn't properly done. So maybe we need to really start with communication, that those things are expected, and hopefully we could maybe work with a group of realtors that when they're selling a house, they have to say, you need a development permit or this won't be a suite for you. Because to take people to task when they had no idea that they couldn't do this when they bought the house, like, it's a big investment and then it's just illegal. So I think we really need to start those steps really of communicating to the general public the necessity about that you're following exactly what our guidelines are. And also with realtors to just tell them, sorry, you won't be able to use the suite. And then they know that. To start. Because I really can't see evicting people. I can't see getting into any of those things.
Do you have feedback on that question? No. If not, I can go on to Councilor Sorensen because he's going to attack this.
So for a moment, I'm trying to, regroup what I've heard, and I've heard both sides. So I think what we're going to do is come back with sort of a plan. How could we do this? And then, based on the plan that we offer, perhaps then council could provide further direction. Yeah, let's do an amendment to the land use bylaw, or let's wait till the land use bylaw rewrite. So we can certainly do that.
Councilor Sorensen.
Through the chair, through council, I really like the idea of some kind of passive enforcement, putting something on title would significantly help. And not only for the person buying the property, knowing that it wasn't compliant, but also insurance agencies look at titles and they would know that this needs to be insured for liability for a suite. And we also potentially could look at to incentivize these unknown suite owners to come in and register their suite. Potentially, we could look at grandfathering, I mean, at least the location in, but not necessarily the fire codes and all of the safety issues. So we can say for 1 year, come in and register your property. And as long as it meets fire codes, electrical, plumbing, insurance, then you would be grandfathered in. And yeah, for sure. Well, they're already a drain on our utilities, so we might as well. We can't kick them out. Yeah, so I'm excited.
Okay, so I will bring something back to council for further discussion, and we'll take it from there.
I'll just one comment and then yes, because you got a lot. Actually, Councillor Wilson brought up a very good point. Part of this was it's complaint driven. So we need to have a law in place because I agree we've had some for many years in our town. And when we had the gallery full, it was because a certain individual was taking advantage of it and was causing trouble in the neighborhood. So I believe what you're saying, Ms. Lemieux, bring back more information, but we have power for a complaint, that's where we addressed it, was driven by a complaint. So I don't know if we gave you enough information, but you probably have a lot of homework. And I think Mr. Mayor has one more comment and then
Councillor Butter has a comment.
Yes, sorry. Yeah.
Thank you. Through the chair to Ms. Lemieux. I was just going to say that I think the passive method that Theodore mentioned is something that I would favor. I sided with Councillor Sorensen on this. I would prefer to start the conversation and try to tackle it. I think right now, if people are at home a little bit more, perhaps they would be engaged in this, because I know it affects a lot of houses and neighborhoods.
I would just speak to that too.
Yeah, go ahead.
Something I wanted to throw in there a few times is now may be a good time when the housing pressure is a lot lower than waiting, and it would be nice to be faced with the 2010s problems again of a booming economy and all the pressures that come along with it. But if we wait until then to deal with the issue, it's too late, right? It's just not going to be functional. And so a year from now, 6 months difference is probably not a huge difference, but I just do advocate for the principle of, hey, if there's issues, then let's at least address them, or at least acknowledge them, and then begin a plan to address them. And I think we're on track with the conversation that's happening this evening.
Take one more last comment.
Yeah, so thanks for bringing this forward, Ms. Lemieux. One question is, so if somebody comes, people are going to see this, they're going to be asking questions, they may say, oh geez, I want to deal with this issue. What process would we give them if they came to the planning department tomorrow asking, how do I get into compliance? That'd be my first question to you. And to Councillor Sorensen's point, I really like that thought process of grandfathering people in, or at least no enforcement mechanisms if you register with us for a period of time to get those suites. And then after a certain point in time, if you haven't taken that opportunity, then we come at you with those enforcement tools, just to encourage people to come in and work with them to get them up to code. I think next to the infrastructure issues, I think the public safety point of view is probably the biggest thing we need to be concerned about.
Mr. Chair, if you're the mayor's the process the largest challenge will be if it's not owner occupied. That's the issue. And so the issue is, are we going to go away from owner occupied and look more at secondary suites, or are we? So if a person comes in tomorrow and would like to make their suites legal, we must abide by the current bylaw. The current bylaw says it has to be owner occupied. That's the only way we're going to be able to do it. So we would determine whether that applicant is the owner, and if it's the owner, then we would go through the process.
So I've changed my position on this as a part of this conversation. That's why these conversations are important. To me, I think that our first and most fundamental issue has to be on the safety issue of this, and trying to find out where these suites are and trying to get everybody up to code. So I think without question, with the information provided with us, I don't think we have any other choice than to look at changing our land use bylaw, and then dealing with those safety issues. So I'd be in support of moving forward with some changes sooner rather than later, based on the conversations that we've had here over the course of the last hour.
We have another one.
I've also
Go
changed.
ahead, Councillor.
I've also changed, and we just want to ensure that you can't go anywhere in December because you're gonna have too much work to do. So I like the idea of you coming forth with a plan of what we could do. And so that we can kind of see from there how this will work, but I would agree. The conversation around the table has definitely changed my mind on it, so I'd love to see a plan.
Great.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
Run, Bridget.
So you're here till February?
You have to
starting
bring
this out?
every part of the bylaw before you can go,
Okay, I'm gonna go
You're here
by,
till December 2021.
or 25.
so I'm gonna go by my iPad instead of paper, and it is E4.
Maybe work for me, you guys.
Okay, perfect, Mitch. E4 and oh, cool. Go ahead, when you're ready. Don't be nervous, you have enforcement and move them behind you.
But Troy, I've seen some of those suites when I looked at houses. I'm gonna need them over these.
I actually bought a house and had a suite, and I didn't even question that.
No, just depends for, like, this is for Robert, so really low end houses. And you're living in, it's just.
Thank you, Mayor and Council, for having me tonight.
Go ahead.
So one of the items listed in the strategic priorities matrix under the color property and vibrant community is developing a low income accessibility strategy for programs that the town offers. This would include community development programs, recreation, arts, culture, and success, and then professional place programs like myself and Michael McLean, when he was here, were tasked with researching this priority and coming up with industry best practices for starting the assistance program. Staff report in front of you included research principles to consider and a potential funding source, and then some options for how we would start this program. So I just have a really brief presentation. I'll just go through. We have lots of information. So we know that cost is a barrier to participation. If you have a lower income, community services programs will require a higher percentage of your income, which may not fit into your household budget. We also know that participating in recreational, cultural, and social programs has very positive benefits to overall well-being. That has become even more evident with COVID and the isolation and disconnect that we're all dealing with. So our ultimate goal is a happy and healthy engaged community, and this pilot program will help reduce that cost barrier to ensure that programming is inclusive for all of our residents. So in researching similar programs in other communities our size, we discovered a measuring tool that's commonly used to determine this eligibility. So it's called the low income cutoff measure, and it's established by staff. So we use this tool in Edson and determined there are approximately 400 households that would fall under this low income cutoff measure. So the research was done for this project in 2019, and table 3 that's on the screen in the report was the chart being used for populations under 30,000. So we recognize that this chart will change, and we can update it in this project yearly as we review the program. So Michael and I researched 16 other municipalities with similar population sizes and found that there is an existing program in 7 of these communities. So we reviewed the policies and applications and how that helped shape the parameters for what similar program would look like. Some of the communities went with a lump sum credit and some went with a discount option, whichever aligned better with their guiding principles and logistics of implementing the program. So that just brings me to some principles to consider while moving forward in this presentation. Just do we want a large number of low-income residents to access the program with reduced subsidy amount, or Or we want a large or small quantity of low-income residents to access the program with an increased subsidy amount. Keeping behind these proposed amounts here based on our research. And the total potential cost if 1/3 of the eligible residents of eligible households access the program would be about $40,000. And something else to consider, do we want recipients of the program to have fully subsidized services, or should they pay a portion of that fee? And what portion should they pay? So some of the other communities use this 50% discount model. But keep in mind that some of our programs, even at half of the full amount, is still can be quite a large sum of money for some residents to afford.
Okay, open question. We only have 1 hour. Go ahead, Councilor Sorensen.
Oh, no, I'm sorry.
Oh,
We can
sorry.
talk about this, but then
I think these were did you want Chris to?
Do you want questions now?
Your presentation.
Sure.
Oh, I thought you were done. Sorry, carry on.
2 parts. Principles to consider and then some proposed options. So the lump sum is one approach that some communities use, and it's something that we would recommend going forward with. Some of the pros, you'd be able to register in person as well as online. So this would allow for more privacy, convenience, and a better chance of accessing programs that fill up really quickly, as well as less staff time required if we promote online registration. So some of the cons to that would be there's no personal buy-in, so potentially not show up for the program to take a spot away from someone who also signed up. However, lots of communities, they just monitor that and don't fit on a case-by-case basis. And or there could be a 50% discount model or a different percentage of what you guys thought. So some of the pros of that is the assumption is that they are more committed to the program because they have a personal buy-in. Cons would be in-person registration in some place, less privacy, more staff time, and less potential access to the programs. So currently, our programs are filling up within a few days, and so you may miss out if you have to do in-person registration. Also, with COVID, our drop-in programs like Public Skate and Swim, you do have to register ahead of time prior to attending. So the 50% model, they would be unable to do that. And then the third option could be 1 or 2, but minus swimming lessons, just because Jumpstart, our local chapter can fund swimming lessons. So we would encourage them to access that before a program. And they, just to note, Jumpstart also uses the low-income cutoff measure for their eligibility. And they operate in a similar way that we're proposing as a first-come, first-served basis. Yeah. So just looking, one more slide. So just something to consider with this, it's a pilot project, but we need to think about how we can fund this if it went well and we wanted to continue it. So we just brought forward some ideas for potential long-term funding. So one would be an annual budget and item funded by taxes. Another would be maybe revamping our user fees to build in a reserve to support the program. This could have some negative effects on our participation and potentially price out other attendees of our programs if we were to do that. But we could also pursue other avenues like sponsored fundraising to raise funds. So just looking for some feedback. This is the first go at it. So
You're done now. You ready for questions?
I'm ready.
Councilor
I just
Sorensen,
want
been
me to
waiting.
go back to the slide.
Go ahead, Councilor Sorensen.
Through the chair to administration, I just want to say what a fantastic report this is. Every question, almost every question I had was right on the next page. So very good job in putting this together. I am in support of this in general. I think we should be using the LICO cutoff just because it's a standardized number and without any debate that needs to go around it. I am in support of a 50% discount, just so there is some ownership on behalf of the user. And I'm hoping that you can come up with some kind of online discount code for 50% so that people can register at home in the privacy of their home and not have to come in for an awkward situation. So those are my recommendations. And as far as funding, we'll just have, if it was a 50% discount, you wouldn't be able to really predict it ahead of time, so it would just have to be some kind of estimate put into the budget at the beginning of the year. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor.
Yes, through the chair, thank you, Krista, for the presentation, and I'm glad that you're looking at moving forward with something like this. I also agree with a 50% discount. I really think that even if you are low income, I know that sometimes it's a challenge. There does need to be some ownership, and there needs to be some contribution. So, and I agree with Councillor Smartson said regarding the cutoff levels. As for the funding of this for this year, this upcoming year, I would suggest that we look at using our COVID assistance or most grant to fund that. Really, for this upcoming year, the low income are probably the ones impacted by COVID and what's going on. And then look at a transition period using that recreation and culture reserve for the following 2 years. And see if there is a corporate sponsor that would be willing to contribute to this in the years moving forward. There might also be some grants that you could apply through some of the nonprofits to see if they want to help out with covering the cost of this program. But thank you very much for the work you put into this.
Councillor Byer, did you have your hand up?
Yes, I did, yeah. Thanks to the chair, to Krista. I thought this was a great presentation and lots of facts presented in comparison to other communities, and I really appreciated that. Initially my thoughts were the 50-50 because I feel that ownership is necessary. But I also, as a pilot project, I feel that we're not necessarily maximizing and getting a true picture of the people that are in that income bracket that would actually use the programs, right? As you stated, not 100% of the people aren't going to be using the programs. You estimated that is a third. My thoughts are if we went with 100%, then we would know as a pilot project what those numbers really are, right? To get a good base. And also if we could find a way, and it was thought about having a user code for online discounts if that was even possible, but if that is something that is not possible, I think that now limits the low income people again, that they now can't register online. And I think from what we've heard previously about the Jumpstart and even people going to the food bank is that, if they have to talk to more people about this, they're less inclined to do it. And I think that that's not ideal, and that if there's the least amount of people that know that they're utilizing it, then maybe that will help those groups out. And so was this a 1-year pilot then, right? Just okay. So if it's just for 1 year, I guess you can kind of change it mid-year to do that. But I think, if it's a pilot, then why not try to get the maximum amount of people utilizing the program to see where that interest is, and then make the changes necessary later if you're getting that much abuse, right? I don't know what that would look like, but yeah, I think I want to see the maximum of people using it to see where we're at. And I like the idea of funding from that most grant. I never really thought about that, but and saving the reserve for the following year if we want to proceed after that.
Go ahead.
Just through the chair, to the 3 questions about the just 50% and discount. At this point, we haven't found a way on ActiveNet to do a 50% coupon and not have people be able to share the program. So we haven't found success in that yet, but we'll keep trying if that's the direction.
Councillor Wilkinson.
I'd like to thank you for this report. You are serving exactly the people we need to serve in recreation. So thank you so much for that. And I ditto exactly what Troy said, Councillor Johnson said. But I would like that 50% figured out if you can, so they can register a computer.
Just switched it to, I had it facing you the whole time. Thank you through the chair, Deputy Mayor Chenard. I would be in support. Originally, I kind of was in the same boat where I like that 50% for a little bit of buy-in. But I think that we're missing the point a little bit when we're discussing that. We know that our vulnerable section struggles to get there, and also that $40, like depending some of the things that we're asking for, that 50% is still a barrier. It is still a barrier. And I do kind of follow where Councillor Byer was discussing that. I think what we're really in a pilot is trying to figure out what the need is. And definitely if they have to go in, that is a huge barrier. Having to go, it's a huge barrier for any of us. It's a barrier for us. And especially now that you have to even to just go to public swim, you have to register and stuff. So I would be more in support of what Councillor Byer said, is that we, for this first year, have that kind of lump sum and see what the need is. I also think once we've started that program, we now have access to the people using it. And I don't think there's any harm in starting this way. And then 6 months in, or like the year into it, asking the people who are accessing it, would you prefer us to continue with this lump sum, or would you prefer 50%? Because some people might be accessing it enough that they're going to use way more than a lump sum in that 50%. My guess is we won't see a lot of that, but I think that first little bit, I agree. I think we want to get the true people that are going to use it with the least amount of barriers. And then once we know who's using it, we then have the ability to actually access them and see what is best for them or what will work for them, because ultimately that's who we're trying to serve. The whole purpose is to get them. So I think in a pilot, we have to limit all the factors as much as we can, like the barriers, right? And great report.
Councillor Bevins.
Through the chair to Krista, thank you very much in that. I did read this and I was thinking the one way here, but I still thought that I would rather go with 100%. And I agree with the mayor, maybe using our voice, because it is a pilot project. And that's the idea of a pilot project, to find out, what we need to go moving forward. And I think the results we get from that, we will know what we need to do going down the road here. So I would support the 100% in that. And like Councillor Curry said here, maybe people that are using it don't need to use as much, but we will have information and data on that. And if we have to cut it back going forward, or a grant or whatever, we can do that. I think it's a pilot project. I would like to see us go 100%.
Go ahead.
Just a question, if we cannot find a way to do the 50% discount model that would allow them to do it online at home, would council be comfortable then going with the lump sum credit approach? If there was no way for that barrier of having to go into the year-end.
Councillor Sorensen.
Through the chair too, because I'm not so worried about people sharing 50% code, but I'm assuming they're going to be sharing it with other people that might need the code. And you can change the codes every month or whatever, just so that it's not shared too much. But it's not a huge concern for me anyway. Thank you.
Go ahead, Guy.
To the chair of council, just to clarify, right now we don't know if we can do it. That doesn't mean we can't do it. And there are other methods of administering the program that we could use that might be more staff labor involved, but would still meet the needs of the program, like a single, like Krista managing, and they phone in and do the registration through her. It would be more laborious, but it would allow a single point of contact and them to do it. There are other methods that we will consider once we know the general principles of what you guys would like us to do.
Mr. Mayor, go ahead. Through to Krista and Guy. So from an administrative perspective, what is the most efficient way to administer this program? Is it the lump sum? Or is there a possibility of a 50% discount? I'm not hard on any one of those options, but I do really feel that we do need to use that, either the code reserve or the most reserve for this year.
Go ahead, Guy.
Through the chair of the council, the easiest way is to credit their ActNet account with the amount they approved on. So say a family of 2 for that 300, that would go onto their ActNet account as a credit. And then they can use that for any program in any amount they choose to. So with all of our programs throughout the year, that's the easiest, simplest way to administer the program. It also gives them the most flexibility. Basically, they get approved for the program. So $150, $300, $450 on the side of the family. Based on that amount, we credit that to their account. It sits there and they can apply it to any program at any time to access. So if they wanted to apply it all on programs right away, and on 1 or 2 programs with the family, or if they want to spread that out and use it in little bits on programs, then it would give them the flexibility to do that in the way they want.
That's great. Do you have your hand up? Or are we just waving at me?
I didn't even.
Oh, I thought you were moving your hand. Oh, go ahead.
I go back to, I fully support the 100%. And because exactly that, I've had a credit on my account before and you can decide. So it does allow people some of that flexibility to, spread it out through the year if they want to. But I do think ultimately it's the #1 limiting factor for our vulnerable sector. And that takes away the most barriers. And I think that when doing a pilot, that's our goal, is to use it to the most.
Okay, my comment, I'm going to agree with Councillor Curry.
You got my name right, I'm so.
Oh, well, I was looking, I was going to call you.
It only took 2.5 hours.
But my only comment is that I like the whole concept, but then we're dealing with COVID. So your pilot project is great, but are we going to get our true thing? But I mean, we can't just stall. So the 100% makes sense. Let's move forward with it. And because we do have money in reserve from other things, so let's try it. It's a 1-year project. Okay, go ahead.
Chair, to what amount? 40,000 would be if we were to access a third of the household.
Okay, I'm not going to make the same comment I did earlier or something else.
Just in fact,
Okay, well then I'll throw it back. What kind of amount would you be looking at? We do have money in reserve. What would you think would be an acceptable thing to make your pilot work?
we are, in this, through the chair. If we were to access a third of the households, that's what we're kind of going to shoot for. It would be $40,000.
Good.
At an average of $300.
Go ahead, Mr. Mayor.
I'm willing to say let's go with 50,000, make it a nice even number, and see where we're at the end of the year. And the other thing too is I would hope that if you see that it's being widely used and it's widely needed, come back to us to see if we need to reassess. And I say use those reserves that we've talked about for this exact reason. So.
Through the chair to council, just a point of clarification. If we are to use our rec and culture operational reserve, we only have 42,000 left in it, 42, 44, and so 40 would deplete that if we used it, if we're using what we recommended. But if we get clear direction from council on another source, that's fine, but I just want to make sure you know that what we were recommending was the rec and culture reserve, operational reserve, which only has $42,000 after we depleted it for Griffith.
Yeah, so that's why I'm suggesting we'll use the most reserve of the COVID-19 recovery for this year, and that will allow us to have those funds available and give us a transition if we want to extend this after the 1-year pilot, using the 42,000 and then starting to transition out.
Councillor, go ahead.
Yes, through the chair to Krista, my direction is 100% and then fund it from the most grant or the COVID reserve this year.
Councillor Sorensen.
I just had a thought. I'm in support of the funding discussions. So these programs this assistance would only be in for town offered services. Like, I'm just wondering if there's an opportunity to include other sport or recreation activities within the town, minor hockey, soccer, other, like, there's a lot more recreation in town that it isn't on active net.
Go ahead.
Chair. Lots of those would be able to be funded through Jumpstart. Would be the avenue that we would encourage people to go through it. Most likely they would get approved to pursue the activities.
Councillor Curry.
Through the chair, just in here, I saw that it kind of fluctuated between whether it was per person in the household or per household. Did administration have a recommendation on that? What was your thoughts of flat rate per household, no matter how many are in that household, or was there a per person?
We were recommending the 150 per individual.
Okay.
200 per house, between 1 and 450.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, it's right there. I like that.
Mr. Mayor.
Through to Krista, I know that we offer a lot of programming to Yellow County residents. Would this be for town of Edson residents only? Or would this be available to Yellow County residents? I think it should be only town of Edson residents because this is coming out of our reserves. I don't know if you've given any consideration to that or how we deal with that, or if you have any conversations with your colleagues over at the county. Go ahead.
Through the chair to the mayor, this would just be for town of Edson residents. As a pilot project, we're just keeping it in the town.
Through the chair to council, that currently is our approach for the first year. Depending on how it goes, we could have discussions with the county and move it into cost sharing, but not.
We can get out of here. Okay, any more questions on this? Krista, thank you for your report, and Guy, thank you. And we will move on. And I believe, let's go by the iPad because paper lies to me. We are going to go to an in-camera session. Was there any questions or concerns?
I would suggest that we extend the time allotment for this meeting because I don't think we're going to get done by 10 o'clock.
That was the next suggestion. Administration was going to be there.
And can we make that motion in the whole? I think there's allowance for that.
That is one of the very few motions that is still.
So I will make that
Okay,
motion.
Mr. Mayor, I'll take your motion. All those
Just as a
under.
note, it does have to be unanimous for it to.
No.
But we will try to get out of here by 10 o'clock. Let's all promise ourselves that.
It just makes it a little smoother. We don't have to worry about it once we're.
Okay.
Okay, everyone understands the question. All those in favor? Okay, do we have any questions or concern? No, no questions. Okay, and then that's it. Then we're going to look for a motion to go
Can
in.
we have a recess first?
5-minute recess.
Do we do it first or after?
First.
Good.
Motion, you have to declare a recess.
Okay, I'm declaring, well, I thought we were voting this. Okay,
You
I'm
don't have to vote on that.
declaring a
5-minute
5-minute
recess.
Okay, a motion to go in camera. All those in favor? Sorry. Councillor Curry. All those in favor? No opposed.